The deafening crack of a gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of San Angelo, Texas, as Sophia Foster clutched her small valise tighter and pressed herself against the weathered wall of the stagecoach station. It wasn't the welcome she had expected when she'd left her home in Boston 3 weeks ago, full of hope for a new life in the West. April 1875 had seemed like the perfect time for a fresh start. At 23, Sophia had answered an advertisement in the Boston Herald from the Western Matrimonial Agency, promising respectable matches for ladies willing to travel west to marry prosperous ranchers and businessmen. After losing both parents to influenza the previous winter, and facing the prospect of becoming a burden to her married sister's growing family, the agency's promises had seemed like divine providence. "Move along, miss," a gruff voice instructed as the town marshal hurried past, pistol drawn, in the direction of the saloon where the shot had originated. "Ain't safe to be loitering." Sophia nodded, though the lawman had already disappeared around the corner. She had arrived on the afternoon stage, expecting to be met by her intended husband, a successful cattle rancher named Jefferson Blackburn, who had described himself in his letters as 42, well-established, and eager to welcome a cultured Eastern bride to his prosperous ranch 15 miles outside of San Angelo. But no one had met her stage. After waiting 2 hours, she'd tentatively approached the station master. "Blackburn," he'd echoed when she inquired. "Jefferson Blackburn." A look of confusion crossed his weathered face. "Miss, there ain't no Jefferson Blackburn ranching near San Angelo. Never has been, far as I know." Those words had caused her stomach to drop to her feet. Now, as the afternoon shadows lengthened across the main street, Sophia felt the full weight of her predicament. Her funds were nearly depleted after paying the agency's substantial fee. She had exactly $8.17 to her name, enough perhaps for 2 nights' lodging and a few meals at best. "You look lost," came a deep voice from behind her. Sophia turned quickly, startled to find herself face to face with a tall man in a worn leather vest and dusty cowboy hat. His eyes, blue as the Texas sky, studied her with open curiosity. He wasn't handsome in the conventional sense. His face was too angular, his skin too bronzed by the sun, but something about the quiet confidence in his stance made her heart skip a beat. Sophia hesitated, unwilling to admit her predicament to a stranger. "I'm waiting for someone who seems to be delayed." The man's gaze swept over her traveling outfit, the small valise, and the neat trunk sitting beside her. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You're one of the mail-order brides, aren't you?" Heat rushed to Sophia's cheeks. "I prefer the term correspondence match, sir." A smile tugged at his lips. "No offense meant, madam." He removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "Matthew Kane. I own the Circle K ranch north of town." "Sophia Foster," she replied with the polite nod her mother had taught her was appropriate when meeting gentlemen. "Recently of Boston. And who might you be waiting for, Miss Foster?" The kindness in his voice nearly undid her composure. "A Mr. Jefferson Blackburn," she admitted, then added softly, "though I've been informed by the station master that no such person exists in San Angelo." Matthew Kane's expression darkened. "The Western Matrimonial Agency." Sophia's eyes widened. "How did you know?" "You're the third woman to arrive here in the past 2 months looking for men who don't exist." His jaw tightened. "That agency's nothing but a bunch of swindlers taking money from desperate men and hopeful women." The blunt assessment caused Sophia's carefully maintained composure to crack. "I see," she whispered, blinking rapidly to hold back tears. All her hopes, the last of her inheritance spent on passage west and the agency fee gone in an instant. Matthew Kane watched the emotions play across her face. He'd seen that same look of desperation on the other women, who'd been similarly deceived. The first had managed to secure employment at the hotel as a laundress before moving on to El Paso with a drummer who'd taken a shine to her. The second had ended up working at the Silver Spur Saloon, though not, thankfully, in the capacity that many women there served. "You have family back east who could wire you funds?" he asked, already suspecting the answer. "No one who could help," Sophia admitted, squaring her shoulders. "I'll find work. I'm educated. I taught at a small academy in Boston for 2 years. Perhaps the local school terms already started with Mrs. Henderson teaching, and she's contracted for the year." Matthew hesitated, then made a decision that would change both their lives. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Foster." Sophia stiffened. "Sir, if you're suggesting nothing improper," Matthew interrupted, raising his hands. "I'm in need of a housekeeper at my ranch. My previous one, Mrs. Wilkins, left last month to care for her ailing sister in Fort Worth. It's honest work with room and board plus wages. You'd have your own quarters, small but private, adjacent to the main house." Sophia studied him carefully. There was nothing in his demeanor that suggested ulterior motives, but she had already been deceived once. "Why would you offer employment to a complete stranger?" "Because you need help, and I need a housekeeper," Matthew replied simply. "Also, my mother would haunt me from her grave if I left a lady stranded in town with night coming on." His eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. "I was raised better than that." The mention of his mother softened something in Sophia's wary heart. "And your wife? Would she welcome a strange woman into her home?" "No wife," Matthew replied. "Never found the time for courting between building the ranch and keeping it running." He gestured toward her trunk. "You don't have to decide this minute. The hotel has rooms available. Think it over tonight. I'll be in town until noon tomorrow, have business at the bank and with the mercantile. You can give me your answer then." Sophia considered her options, which were painfully few. "What would my duties entail?" "Cooking for myself and my 3 ranch hands, keeping the main house tidy, laundry and such. Nothing beyond what any housekeeper would do." He named a monthly wage that was modest but fair. After a moment's consideration, Sophia nodded. "I accept your offer, Mr. Kane, provided I may leave without prejudice if the arrangement proves unsuitable." Relief flooded his features. "That's fair enough, and it's Matthew, please." "Very well, Matthew." The familiarity felt strange on her tongue. "I should tell you that while I can cook, my repertoire is somewhat limited to Boston fare." A genuine smile spread across his face. "Their mistake is my blessing, then. I've been living on my own cooking and whatever my ranch hands can manage." "Believe me, Miss Foster, anything you prepare will be an improvement. In that case, please call me Sophia." She extended her hand, which he took gently. "Welcome to Texas, Sophia." And so began Sophia Foster's unexpected life in San Angelo, Texas, not as the bride she had intended to be, but as the housekeeper for a rancher whose quiet strength stirred something within her that she wasn't yet ready to acknowledge. The Circle K Ranch sprawled across nearly 15,000 acres of rolling Texas hill country. As Matthew's wagon crested the final rise the following afternoon, Sophia caught her first glimpse of what would be her new home. The main house was modest but sturdy, a 2-story structure built of local limestone with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Several outbuildings clustered nearby, and in the distance, she could see cattle grazing on the spring green grass. "It's not what you expected coming from Boston," Matthew observed, noting her wide-eyed assessment. "It's beautiful," Sophia replied honestly. After the cramped confines of city living, the open space and distant horizons filled her with an unexpected sense of freedom. "How long have you had this land?" "7 years," Matthew answered, pride evident in his voice. "Started with 500 acres and 600 head of longhorns, built it up slowly." He guided the wagon toward the house. "My father was a rancher up in the Panhandle. He taught me everything I know before he and Ma died of cholera when I was 19. Sophia felt a pang of sympathy. "I lost my parents to influenza last winter." Matthew glanced at her, a moment of shared understanding passing between them. "It doesn't get easier, but it gets more bearable with time." As the wagon rolled into the yard, 3 men emerged from one of the outbuildings. Sophia straightened her back, suddenly conscious of the impression she would make. "That's Diego Rodriguez, my foreman," Matthew said, nodding toward a lean, dark-haired man in his 30s. "Best horseman in 3 counties. The younger one's Charlie Wilson, good with cattle but still green, and the older fellow is Henry Miller, been with me since I started the ranch." The men approached as Matthew helped Sophia down from the wagon. "Boys, this is Miss Sophia Foster. She'll be taking over as housekeeper." His tone made it clear he expected them to be respectful. Diego tipped his hat. "Welcome to Circle K, Miss Foster." Charlie, who couldn't be more than 20, blushed crimson and mumbled a greeting, while Henry offered a weathered hand and a kind smile. "Pleased to meet you, madam. We've been missing Mrs. Wilkins cooking something fierce." "I'll do my best not to disappoint," Sophia replied, already warming to the genuine welcome. Matthew carried her trunk while Diego took her valise, showing her to the small but neat room attached to the main house by a covered walkway. It was simple: a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, a small writing desk, and a washstand, but clean and private. "I'll let you get settled," Matthew said from the doorway. "Supper's usually at 6, but don't worry about cooking tonight. Mrs. Abernathy from town sent some stew with us." "It's in the kitchen." Sophia nodded, grateful for the consideration. "Thank you. I'll be ready to start my duties first thing tomorrow." After Matthew left, Sophia sank onto the bed, overwhelmed by how quickly her circumstances had changed. 24 hours ago, she had been anticipating meeting her future husband. Now, she was a housekeeper on a remote Texas ranch. Tears threatened, but she pushed them back. Self-pity would accomplish nothing. Instead, she unpacked her few belongings, washed the travel dust from her face, and changed into a simpler dress more suited to her new position. By the time she entered the main house's kitchen, she had composed herself and was ready to face her new reality. The first few weeks at Circle K established a routine. Sophia rose before dawn to start breakfast for the men, who appeared promptly at 5:30, hungry and appreciative of whatever she prepared. She spent mornings cleaning, baking, and preparing the midday meal, which Matthew usually took with his men out on the range. Afternoons were for laundry, mending, and starting supper, which was served at 6 when the men returned, dusty and tired from the day's work. What surprised her most was how quickly she adapted to ranch life. The work was hard but satisfying. Each evening after the kitchen was cleaned, she would sit on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in hues of gold, crimson, and purple that no Boston artist could have captured. Matthew often joined her for these quiet moments, respectfully sitting at the other end of the porch. Their conversation started with practical matters, supplies needed from town, ranch activities, but gradually expanded to include their pasts, their families, and their thoughts on everything from books to politics. "I never expected to find someone out here who'd read Emerson," Matthew commented one evening in late May, the air heavy with the scent of approaching rain. Sophia smiled. My father was a professor of literature before ill health forced him to retire. Our home was filled with books. I've collected a few myself, Matthew admitted. They're in my study. You're welcome to borrow any that interest you. The offer delighted her, and the following afternoon, while the men were working with the cattle, Sophia ventured into Matthew's study for the first time. The room revealed a side of him she hadn't fully appreciated: shelves lined with volumes ranging from practical texts on animal husbandry to Shakespeare, Thoreau, and yes, Emerson. A worn copy of the Odyssey sat on his desk, a bookmark visible about halfway through. As she ran her fingers along the spines, Sophia realized she was developing feelings for her employer that extended beyond gratitude or friendship. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. She was his housekeeper, nothing more. And she still carried the shame of having been so thoroughly deceived by the matrimonial agency. Unknown to Sophia, Matthew was wrestling with similar feelings. He found himself looking forward to their evening conversations more than any other part of his day. Her intelligence, resilience, and quiet grace had impressed him from the start, but now he found himself noticing other things: the way sunlight caught the auburn highlights in her brown hair, how her eyes crinkled at the corners when she truly smiled, the graceful movement of her hands as she worked. "You're sweet on her," Diego observed one afternoon as they rode the boundary fence line. Matthew scowled at his foreman. "Miss Foster is my employee." Diego's knowing smile only widened. "That wasn't what I asked, patron." "It's complicated," Matthew finally admitted. "Only because you make it so," Diego replied with the directness of a longtime friend. "She looks at you when you're not watching, same way you look at her." The observation stayed with Matthew for days afterward, distracting him from work and making him self-conscious during his evening conversations with Sophia. She noticed the change, wondering if she had somehow overstepped or displeased him. The first genuine crisis came in early June. Sophia had been at Circle K for nearly 6 weeks when she rode into town with Matthew for supplies. While he conducted business at the bank, she visited the general store to purchase household necessities. As she was examining bolts of fabric for new kitchen towels, a well-dressed man entered the store. He approached the proprietor, speaking in a voice loud enough for Sophia to overhear. "I'm looking for a woman who might have arrived in San Angelo about 6 weeks ago. Came out from Boston as a mail-order bride, name of Sophia Foster." Sophia froze, the fabric forgotten in her hands. The proprietor shook his head, but his wife, who was arranging tins of tea on a shelf nearby, turned. "Foster, you say?" "There's a woman by that name working as housekeeper out at the Circle K ranch. Pretty girl, Boston accent." "Much obliged, madam," the stranger replied, tipping his hat. "Would you know where I might find this Circle K ranch?" Before the woman could answer, Sophia stepped forward, heart hammering. "I am Sophia Foster. Who's asking?" The man turned, surprise registering on his handsome face. "Miss Foster, what luck finding you so quickly." He removed his hat, revealing neatly trimmed blonde hair. "Elliot Warren, representative of the Western Matrimonial Agency. I've been sent to correct a most unfortunate error." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "Error? Is that what you call defrauding women of their savings and abandoning them in strange towns?" Warren had the grace to look abashed. "An unfortunate misunderstanding, I assure you. There was indeed a Jefferson Blackburn who contracted our services, but he was based in San Angelo, New Mexico Territory, not Texas. The clerk who processed your application made a grave error." "That seems remarkably convenient, Mr. Warren," Sophia replied, skepticism evident in her tone. "I understand your doubt, but I've been sent to make amends." He reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. The agency has authorized me to refund your entire fee, plus an additional $50 for your inconvenience. Furthermore, Mr. Blackburn is still eager to honor the arrangement. I'm prepared to escort you to New Mexico, all expenses paid. The offer stunned Sophia. With the refund and additional compensation, she could return to Boston if she wished, or start fresh somewhere else entirely. Yet the thought of leaving Circle K, leaving Matthew, filled her with unexpected sadness. I need time to consider, she finally said, accepting the envelope but making no promises. Of course. Warren smiled, revealing perfect white teeth. I'm staying at the hotel for 3 days. You can send word of your decision there. The encounter left Sophia shaken. When Matthew found her waiting by the wagon, he immediately noticed her distress. What's happened? He asked, loading the last of the supplies. Sophia related the strange encounter, showing him the envelope with its substantial contents. He says the real Jefferson Blackburn is in New Mexico and still wishes to honor our arrangement. Matthew's face darkened. And you're considering it? I don't know, Sophia admitted. I came west to be a wife, to have a home of my own. That was my plan. The hurt in Matthew's eyes was unmistakable, though he tried to mask it. You have to do what's best for you, he said stiffly, climbing onto the wagon seat. The comfortable camaraderie that had developed between them over the past weeks disappeared, replaced by an awkward silence that lasted the entire journey back to the ranch. That evening, for the first time since her arrival, Matthew did not join Sophia on the porch. The empty chair beside her seemed to mock her indecision. She stared out at the Texas landscape she had come to love, trying to imagine herself in New Mexico with a stranger named Jefferson Blackburn. The image refused to form. After a restless night, Sophia rose before dawn and went about her duties mechanically. She prepared breakfast, but when the men came in, Matthew was not among them. Boss rode out early, Henry explained, helping himself to biscuits. Said he had business that couldn't wait. Sophia nodded, hiding her disappointment. The day stretched endlessly without their usual brief interactions. By late afternoon, she had made her decision. She would not go to New Mexico. Whether she stayed at Circle K or used the money to build a different life was less certain. But she knew she could not marry a stranger, not anymore. Not when her heart was increasingly occupied by thoughts of Matthew Kane. As twilight approached with still no sign of Matthew, Sophia grew worried. She was about to ask Diego if they should search for him when the sound of hoofbeats announced his return. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by nervousness about the conversation they needed to have. Matthew entered the kitchen looking exhausted, his clothes dusty from the trail. He nodded to Sophia but said nothing as he washed up at the basin by the door. The silence between them was painful after the easy companionship they had developed. Supper will be ready soon, Sophia offered. I made stew the kind you said reminded you of your mother's. Thank you, Matthew replied formally, but I'm not hungry. It's been a long day. As he turned to leave, Sophia gathered her courage. Matthew, wait, please. We need to talk about yesterday. He paused, shoulders tense. There's nothing to discuss. You have an opportunity to claim the future you traveled west for. I would never stand in the way of that. And if that's not what I want anymore? Sophia asked softly. Matthew turned slowly to face her, guarded hope in his eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying I've made my decision. I'm not going to New Mexico. Sophia took a deep breath. These past weeks at Circle K, they've changed me, or perhaps they've simply allowed me to discover who I truly am. And who is that? Matthew asked, taking a step closer. Someone who values substance over promises. Someone who has come to care deeply for this land. Sophia's voice faltered slightly. And for the people who call it home. The tension in Matthew's posture eased slightly. "I spent today at the land office and the bank," he admitted. "I was arranging to purchase the Clayton parcel that borders our eastern pasture. It's good grazing land with a natural spring." Sophia looked confused. "That's what was so urgent it couldn't wait. I needed to do something productive. Something that would keep me from riding into town and punching Elliot Warren in his perfect teeth for trying to take you away." The raw honesty in Matthew's voice made Sophia's heart skip. "When I thought about you leaving, I realized something I've probably known for weeks but was too stubborn to admit." "And what's that?" Sophia whispered, hardly daring to hope. Matthew closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. "That their mistake truly was my blessing. You came here looking for a husband and found a position instead. I wasn't looking for anything beyond a housekeeper, but I found." He hesitated, suddenly uncertain. "What did you find, Matthew?" Sophia encouraged, her heart pounding. "Everything," he said simply. "I found everything I didn't know I was missing." The confession hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Then, with gentle deliberation, Matthew bent and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened, as Sophia responded with equal fervor. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Matthew rested his forehead against hers. "I don't want you to be my housekeeper anymore, Sophia." For one horrifying moment, she thought he was dismissing her, until he clarified with a smile. "I'd much rather court you properly if you'll allow it." Joy bubbled up inside her. "I think I'd like that very much." The following morning, Sophia rode into town with Matthew to give Elliot Warren her answer. The agency representative took the news with professional disappointment, but no real surprise. "I thought as much when I saw how you looked at your rancher yesterday," he admitted. "Mr. Blackburn will be disappointed, but these things happen." As they left the hotel, Matthew asked the question that had been bothering him. "Do you think there really is a Jefferson Blackburn in New Mexico?" Sophia considered this. "Perhaps. Or perhaps Mr. Warren is simply very good at his job, traveling from town to town, offering refunds to women who have already established new lives, knowing most won't actually leave." "That's rather cynical for you," Matthew observed with raised eyebrows. "Let's just say my experience has made me more discerning about human nature." Sophia smiled up at him. "Which is why I recognize a good man when I find one." Summer bloomed across the Texas landscape, and with it, the courtship between Matthew and Sophia flourished. True to his word, Matthew courted her properly, taking her to Sunday socials in town, bringing wildflowers he'd gathered while out riding the range, and even arranging for a new housekeeper, Mrs. Concepcion Vasquez, a widow from town who was happy to take over Sophia's former duties. "I feel somewhat guilty," Sophia confessed one evening as they sat on the porch swing Matthew had built specifically for their courtship conversations. "Mrs. Vasquez is doing all the work I used to do, and being paid fairly for it," Matthew reminded her. "Besides, you're hardly idle. I've seen you helping with the vegetable garden, working on those account books I could never make sense of, and teaching Charlie how to read better." It was true. Freed from household duties, Sophia had found other ways to contribute to the ranch's success. Her education and organizational skills proved valuable for managing the ranch's increasingly complex finances, and she had taken an interest in the small orchard on the property, researching ways to improve its yield. By early August, their feelings for each other were obvious to everyone at Circle K. Diego took to clearing his throat loudly whenever he approached them on the porch, while Henry and Charlie exchanged knowing glances when Matthew found excuses to stay near the main house instead of riding out with them. The proposal came on a warm August evening, Matthew had asked Sophia to ride with him to his favorite spot on the property, a small rise overlooking a creek lined with cottonwood trees. They arrived just as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in breathtaking colors. "I used to come here to think when I first bought this land," Matthew explained, helping Sophia down from her horse. "I'd sit and plan what I wanted to build, the kind of ranch I wanted to create." He spread a blanket on the ground, and they sat together, watching the sunset in comfortable silence for several minutes. "I never planned on falling in love," Matthew finally said, his voice soft against the background chorus of cicadas. "The ranch was enough, or so I thought, until you stepped off that stage in San Angelo." Sophia turned to him, her heart racing at the serious tone in his voice. "I know we haven't known each other long by some standards," Matthew continued, taking her hand. "But I've never been more certain of anything in my life." From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. "This was my mother's. Pa gave it to her when they were courting." Inside the box was a delicate gold ring with a small but perfect diamond. "It's beautiful," Sophia whispered. "Sophia Foster, I love you. These past months have shown me what life could be with you by my side as my wife, not my housekeeper." Matthew's voice was steady but filled with emotion. "Would you do me the honor of marrying me?" Tears of happiness filled Sophia's eyes. "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you, Matthew Kane." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Sophia couldn't help but marvel at the twisting path that had led her to this moment. "When I think about how close I came to marrying a man who doesn't even exist." Matthew kissed her gently. "Maybe he does exist, somewhere in New Mexico, but I'm selfishly glad that agency made its mistake." "Their mistake is definitely my blessing too," Sophia replied, leaning into his embrace as the first stars appeared in the Texas sky. News of their engagement spread quickly through San Angelo. Most townspeople responded with warm congratulations, though a few raised eyebrows at the speed of the courtship. Neither Matthew nor Sophia cared about such whispers. They knew the strength of their feelings for each other. They set the wedding date for October 15th, when the worst heat of summer would have passed, but before winter's chill arrived. Sophia threw herself into preparations, corresponding with her sister in Boston, who sent fabric for a wedding dress and small family heirlooms to start their married life. The only shadow on their happiness appeared unexpectedly in late September, just 3 weeks before the wedding. Matthew received a letter from a lawyer in Austin representing a man named Victor Thornton, who claimed to have purchased Jefferson Blackburn's matrimonial contract from the Western Matrimonial Agency and was asserting a legal claim to his property, namely, Sophia. "This is absurd," Matthew fumed after showing Sophia the letter. "You're not property to be bought and sold." "It's an intimidation tactic," Sophia said, though the letter had shaken her. "The agency must be trying to recoup their losses." Matthew immediately rode into town to consult with Judge Harrington, who had practiced law before being appointed to the bench. The judge's assessment was reassuring. "No court in Texas would recognize such a claim," he told Matthew firmly. "Matrimonial contracts aren't legally binding unless both parties enter into marriage. Miss Foster never even met this Blackburn fellow, let alone married him. As for this Thornton character purchasing the contract, that's not how the law works. People aren't commodities." Despite the judge's assurances, Matthew worried. "What if this Thornton comes to San Angelo? I don't want Sophia frightened or harassed. If he shows his face in my jurisdiction causing trouble, I'll have Marshal Dawson lock him up so fast his head will spin," Judge Harrington promised. "But my guess is this is just a desperate attempt to extract money. Ignore it. Go ahead with your wedding plans." They tried to put the matter behind them, but a week later, Victor Thornton himself arrived in San Angelo. He took a room at the hotel and made inquiries about Circle K Ranch and Sophia Foster. When word reached Matthew, he insisted Sophia remain at the ranch while he rode into town to confront the man. "I should come with you," Sophia argued. "This concerns me directly." "That's precisely why you should stay here," Matthew countered. "I don't trust this man or his intentions." In the end, Diego and Henry accompanied Matthew into town, leaving Charlie to keep watch at the ranch. They found Thornton at the hotel dining room, a florid-faced man in an expensive but ill-fitting suit, finishing a large breakfast. "Mr. Thornton," Matthew said without preamble, standing over the man's table. "I'm Matthew Kane. I understand you've been asking questions about my fiancée." Thornton looked up, assessing Matthew and the two ranch hands flanking him. If he was intimidated, he hid it well. "Ah, Mr. Kane, please join me." He gestured to an empty chair. Matthew remained standing. "I'm not here for social pleasantries. I'm here to make it clear that any claim you think you have regarding Miss Foster is legally baseless and unwelcome." Thornton dabbed at his mouth with a napkin. "I paid good money for the matrimonial contract with Miss Foster, $500 to be exact, which I expect to be reimbursed." "Your business arrangement with the agency is your problem, not ours," Matthew replied coldly. "Miss Foster was deceived by that same agency. She owes you nothing." "The law might see differently," Thornton bluffed. "I've spoken to lawyers in Austin who believe I have a valid claim." "Then you've spoken to poor lawyers," came a new voice. Judge Harrington had entered the dining room and approached their table. "Mr. Thornton, I'm Judge Harrington. I oversee legal matters in this county, and I can assure you that your claim wouldn't stand up in any court in Texas." Thornton's confidence visibly wavered. "This is a private business matter. Attempting to assert ownership over a free woman is not business, sir. It borders on criminal behavior," the judge interrupted sharply. "I suggest you finish your breakfast, pack your bags, and be on the afternoon stage. Should you choose to remain in San Angelo causing trouble, I'll have the marshal arrest you for attempted fraud and harassment." Thornton's face reddened with anger, but he was clearly outmatched. "You haven't heard the last of this," he muttered. "Actually, I believe we have," Matthew responded. "Stay away from Miss Foster and from my property." As they left the hotel, Judge Harrington placed a hand on Matthew's shoulder. "Keep an eye out, son. Men like that sometimes lash out when their schemes fail." Matthew nodded grimly. "We'll be vigilant." True to the judge's warning, Thornton did not leave on the afternoon stage. Instead, he spent the day drinking at the Silver Spur Saloon, growing increasingly belligerent as he complained about justice denied and contracts ignored. By evening, Marshal Dawson had warned him twice about disturbing the peace. At Circle K, Matthew doubled the night watch, with Diego and Henry taking turns patrolling the property. His concern proved justified when, shortly after midnight, Henry spotted a rider approaching from the direction of town. He alerted Matthew, who was instantly awake and reaching for his rifle. "Stay inside with the doors locked," Matthew instructed Sophia. "No matter what you hear." Sophia nodded, fear evident in her eyes but determination in her stance. From a drawer, she withdrew a small Derringer pistol. "My father insisted I learn to use this before I came west," she explained at Matthew's surprised look. "I pray I won't need it, but I won't be defenseless." Matthew's admiration for her courage swelled. "I'll be back soon," he promised, kissing her quickly before heading out to join his men. The intruder, clearly Thornton by his silhouette, had dismounted near the barn and was attempting to approach the main house stealthily. He carried what appeared to be a bottle in one hand and a pistol in the other. "That's far enough, Thornton," Matthew called out, his rifle aimed steadily. Startled, Thornton whirled around, his pistol waving erratically. The stench of whiskey reached them even from a distance. Kane! Where's the woman that belongs to me? Miss Foster doesn't belong to anyone, Matthew replied evenly. And you're trespassing on private property while armed and intoxicated. I suggest you leave immediately. Not without what I paid for, Thornton shouted, stumbling slightly. He raised his pistol, aiming roughly in Matthew's direction. Before anyone could react further, a shot rang out not from Thornton or Matthew, but from the porch of the main house. The bullet struck the ground near Thornton's feet, causing him to jump back in alarm and drop his weapon. "The next one won't miss," came Sophia's clear voice from the porch, where she stood with the derringer still raised. "Mr. Thornton, I am not a piece of property to be bought and sold. I never entered into any agreement with you, and I never would. Now leave this ranch and never return." The combined authority in her voice, the shock of being fired upon, and the realization that he was outmatched seemed to penetrate even Thornton's alcohol-muddled brain. He raised his hands shakily. "This isn't over," he slurred, but the threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. "It is over," Matthew countered, nodding to Diego and Henry, who quickly moved to either side of Thornton. "My men will escort you back to town and deliver you to Marshal Dawson. You can spend the night in his jail cell, and in the morning you'll be on the first stage out of San Angelo. If you ever return, you'll face charges of trespassing, attempted assault, and whatever else Judge Harrington can think of." As Diego and Henry led the subdued Thornton away, Matthew rushed to Sophia's side. "That was either the bravest or most foolhardy thing I've ever seen," he said, gathering her into his arms. "I told you to stay inside." "I couldn't just hide while you faced danger on my account," Sophia replied, still trembling slightly from the adrenaline. "Besides, I had a clear shot from the porch." Matthew shook his head in amazement. "You continue to surprise me, Sophia Foster." She smiled up at him, tucking the derringer into her pocket. "Future Mrs. Kane," she corrected. "And don't you forget it." The incident with Thornton served to strengthen the bond between Matthew and Sophia. When Diego and Henry returned from town the following morning, they reported that Thornton had been escorted onto the eastbound stage by Marshal Dawson himself, with a stern warning never to return to San Angelo. Judge Harrington also wired the authorities in Austin about the Western Matrimonial Agency's practices, Diego added. "Seems they've had complaints from all over Texas and New Mexico." With that threat removed, the final preparations for the wedding proceeded joyfully. The women of San Angelo rallied around Sophia, helping with the final touches on her dress and planning the wedding feast. Though she had only known them a few months, she had found true friendship among the ranchers' wives and town shopkeepers who had welcomed her into their community. October 15th dawned clear and perfect, with a crisp autumn breeze tempering the Texas sun. The ceremony took place at the small church in town, filled to capacity with well-wishers. Sophia wore a gown of ivory silk trimmed with lace sent by her sister, her hair adorned with a crown of local wildflowers gathered by the ranch hands' wives that morning. As she walked down the aisle toward Matthew, Sophia reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. What had begun as a desperate gamble, answering an advertisement for a mail-order bride, had led through deception and disappointment to something far more precious than she could have imagined. A love built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. Matthew watched her approach, his heart so full he could barely breathe. The woman who had stepped off that stage 6 months ago, lost and betrayed, now moved toward him with confidence and love shining in her eyes. In that moment, He silently thanked the fraudulent agency whose mistake had truly been the greatest blessing of his life. "Dearly beloved," the minister began once Sophia reached Matthew's side. The traditional words washed over them as they stood hand in hand, exchanging vows with clear voices and unwavering certainty. When Matthew slipped the gold band onto Sophia's finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were steady, his purpose sure. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "Mr. Kane, you may kiss your bride." The kiss they shared was both a promise and a fulfillment, the perfect beginning to their life together. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening, with dancing, feasting, and much laughter. As twilight fell, Matthew and Sophia slipped away from the festivities, riding back to Circle K as husband and wife. The ranch hands had decorated the main house with lanterns and wildflowers, then tactfully retreated to the bunkhouse, leaving the newlyweds to their privacy. On the porch where they had spent so many evenings in conversation, Matthew paused, turning to Sophia with a smile. "Welcome home, Mrs. Kane." "Home," Sophia repeated, savoring the word. "I've been searching for that my whole life, it seems. Who would have thought I'd find it in a place I never intended to be? Life has a way of giving us what we need, not always what we think we want," Matthew replied, drawing her close. "Very philosophical, Mr. Kane," Sophia teased. "Have you been reading Emerson again?" "No need for books tonight," he murmured against her lips. "I have all the wisdom I require right here in my arms." With that, he swept her up and carried her across the threshold into their home, into the beginning of their shared life on the land they both loved. 5 years later, October 1880, the autumn sun cast long shadows across the yard of Circle K Ranch as Sophia sat on the porch, mending a small shirt while keeping an eye on 3-year-old James, who was helping his father and Diego repair the corral fence. The boy's serious expression as he handed Matthew nails from a bucket was almost comical in its intensity. "Not that one, Papa," James instructed solemnly, taking back a bent nail and replacing it with a straight one. "This one's better." "You're right, son," Matthew agreed with equal seriousness. "Good eye." Sophia smiled at the interaction, her hand unconsciously moving to rest on her swollen belly where their second child, a daughter, she was certain would arrive before Christmas. The years since their wedding had been full of hard work, challenges, and profound joy as they had built their life together. Circle K had prospered under their joint stewardship. Matthew's knowledge of ranching combined with Sophia's head for business had allowed them to expand their operations considerably. They now employed 5 full-time ranch hands, and the main house had been extended to include a proper nursery and study. The sound of an approaching wagon drew Sophia's attention. She shaded her eyes against the afternoon sun, recognizing the vehicle as belonging to Clara Wilson, Charlie's wife of 2 years and one of Sophia's closest friends. "Clara's here," she called to Matthew, setting aside her mending to greet the visitor. Clara waved as she brought the wagon to a stop. Beside her sat her 8-month-old daughter, Rose, securely nestled in a basket. "I brought those preserves I promised," Clara announced, handing the basket to her husband, who had hurried over to help her down. "And the mail from town." Among the letters and a newspaper was a small package addressed to Sophia. The return address showed it came from the Texas State Attorney's office in Austin. What could this be? Sophia wondered aloud, carrying it inside where Clara followed with baby Rose. Once seated at the kitchen table, Sophia carefully opened the package. Inside was an official-looking document and a brief letter. As she read, her expression shifted from curiosity to satisfaction. "What is it?" Clara asked, bouncing Rose on her knee. "Justice, finally," Sophia replied, looking up with a smile. The Western Matrimonial Agency has been shut down permanently. The owners were convicted of fraud and sentenced to 5 years in prison. That's wonderful news, Clara exclaimed. After what they did to you and those other women. Sophia nodded, remembering the 2 other women who had arrived in San Angelo before her, similarly deceived. One had eventually found work as a schoolteacher in El Paso. The other had married a local shopkeeper and now ran a successful millinery. There's more, Sophia continued, reading further. The state has seized the agency's assets and is distributing them to verified victims of their scheme. There's a bank draft here for $100 as my share of the restitution. What will you do with it? Clara asked. Sophia considered the question. I think I'll establish a fund at the bank to help other women who find themselves stranded or in difficult circumstances. A kind of emergency resource for women who need a fresh start. When she shared the news with Matthew that evening after the children were asleep, he embraced her warmly. That's a wonderful idea. Your experience will help others who might otherwise have nowhere to turn. It seems fitting, Sophia agreed, leaning into his embrace. Their deception led me to you, to this life I love so much. Perhaps this money can help other women find their own unexpected blessings. From the nursery came a small voice calling for water. Matthew kissed her forehead. I'll go. You should rest doctor's orders. As Matthew attended to their son, Sophia stepped onto the porch, gazing out at the ranch bathed in moonlight. The land stretched before her, so different from the crowded Boston streets of her youth, yet now so deeply a part of her identity. She thought about the frightened young woman who had arrived in San Angelo 5 years ago, betrayed and alone. That woman could never have imagined the life awaiting her: a loving husband, a beautiful son, another child on the way, a prosperous ranch, and a community of true friends. The agency's mistake had indeed been her blessing, the greatest she could have received. As Matthew rejoined her on the porch, slipping his arm around her waist, Sophia offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the twisted path that had led her home. Penny for your thoughts, Matthew murmured, pulling her close against the evening chill. I was just thinking that some mistakes are actually divine providence in disguise, Sophia replied, turning in his arms to face him. And that I am the most fortunate woman in Texas to have found you. I'm the fortunate one, Matthew countered, his eyes reflecting the same love that had captured her heart years ago. Every day I thank God for bringing you to San Angelo, even if it was under false pretenses. As they stood together under the vast Texas sky, the future stretching before them as boundless as the land they loved, Sophia knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true destiny not in a mail-order arrangement, but in the arms of a man whose heart matched her own, on land that had become the foundation of everything they cherished. In the end, what had begun as betrayal had transformed into the most profound blessing either of them could have imagined: a love born of chance, nurtured by respect, and destined to flourish for all their days beneath the endless Texas stars.